hey guys, so it's been a minute since I filmed on this channel, you know, quarantine. I did a video on my mental health throughout all this process and my expectations going into being on lockdown and everything like that on my main channel, so if you want to know like where I've been at mentally. And I hate that my horror channel is the one to like struggle in all of this, like it really kills me. But I know you hate it when like YouTubers apologize for being gone and we just want to get to the point of the video. So today I thought it would be good to do a little catch-up video because it has been so long and I haven't done individual reviews for these movies, so I thought let's just do one big video. I talk about the past 4 big horror movies, some of them aren't, but you saw that in the thumbnail. We're just gonna talk about the last like 4 big movies that I've seen that you guys want to hear my thoughts on, and then we will pick up from there. Obviously, no one's going to the movies right now. A lot of movie companies are releasing their movies to video on demand or being able to rent them instead of having to go see them at the theater. So make sure you're supporting those movies that you wanted to see in the theater and purchasing them and finding them in good ways online. Also, I want to say I've made updated lists, so screenshot these here and thank me later. So they're just the best horror movies on every streaming site. So make sure you take record of that in case you are bored in this quarantine time. Now, I actually haven't been watching too many horror movies. I know people like to think that I would take this opportunity to watch like a bunch of new movies that I haven't seen. And I do have a lot of horror movies on my list to watch, especially now that we have all this time. But I'm a rewatch kind of person. I like to go back, especially in stressful times, I like to go back and rewatch my favorites that I know are good and are just comforting to watch, if that makes sense. But of course, if you have any suggestions of horror movies to watch right now, especially on streaming sites, that would be convenient. I have every single streaming site, so any recommendations at all, I definitely need them. Please leave a comment of what you are watching right now. Also, I've just been watching a lot of documentaries, like literally all of them. So there's that too. Please leave a recommendation for a good documentary down below. So the 4 movies that we are going to be covering today are Parasite, Overlord, Color Out of Space, and The Hunt. And I will have timestamps linked down below for you if you want to jump around through the reviews. We're gonna start with Parasite because I feel like that is the #1 requested thing that I got requested so much to talk about, especially after the Academy Awards. Everyone wanted to hear my thoughts on it, and the reason why I never did a full-on review for it is because it's not a horror movie, and I primarily stick to like typical horror movies. I rarely branch out and talk about thrillers or anything like that, but if you want me to, I could. I just feel like then we're just opening a can of worms and I'm gonna be overwhelmed with all the movies to talk about. Anyway, I was lucky enough to be able to see this in theaters when it was in theaters again after the release last year, and I went and saw this in January, obviously before everything happened. And I saw it before the Academy Awards happened, so I basically went in blind, which I think is the best way to enjoy this movie. And I'm sure by now a lot of us have heard what it's about and, you know, the political statements within it and have just heard general things about it. I had a different expectation going into it, so I think that's why I enjoyed it that much more, because it was so not what I expected. There are turns literally everywhere in the movie and you just have no idea where it's going. But of course, I'm sure by now a lot of you have heard what it's about or looked into it or watched the trailer, which I recommend not doing. If you're one of those people that are still blind to it, stay that way and please watch it. Like I said, this isn't a horror movie, it's more so a drama thriller with comedy and horror elements in it, and I will say the horror elements are good. They're just, I call them horror elements. I don't really feel like there's any part of this movie that is genuinely horror. Just because a movie has gore in it doesn't make it horror. At the end of the day, this movie is many genres. Some could argue that there are horror elements in it, but I don't see it as a horror in any capacity, but definitely more of drama thriller. Now, I think it's no surprise to you guys that I absolutely loved this movie. I think Bong Joon-ho is one of my new favorite, not newly discovered, because I've always liked his work. I just didn't know that I liked his work. So he's definitely like a newfound love and obsession for his work. I know this movie got a lot of hype, and I know that there's, you know, a group of people that are turned off by that when something is overhyped. and I kind of hate that it was so overhyped. However, I do believe it deserved all of the awards that it received. I would say if you're turned off by all this bandwagoning and everyone talking about it, you know, obviously things have died down about it now, but if you were initially turned off by all the hype that it got and didn't think that it would be that amazing, please give it a chance because it is that amazing. It did, of course, set records at the Academy Awards and won Oscars. It was the first non-English movie to be awarded Best Picture and the first South Korean movie to receive any award nomination, which is mind-boggling that it took this long, but I think it deserves it. I think this was the perfect movie to set those records. I think Bong Joon-ho managed to put so many genres into this movie and it didn't feel messy at all or scattered or anything, and there's so much going on, especially like in symbolism. There's a lot going on, and he did all this while still getting his political message across without it being too in your face, I'd say. It's kind of obvious what the political message is, of course, but he did it in such an entertaining way that it didn't feel obnoxious or anything if you are someone who's a little turned off by political messages in movies. If you haven't seen his other work or looked into it at all, Snowpiercer is one of my favorite movies of all time. Again, not a horror movie. It's very similar in tone, I'd say, to Parasite. So if you really liked Parasite and you haven't seen Snowpiercer, get on that. It's also streaming on Netflix right now in the US at least. So definitely check that out if you enjoyed Parasite, because that is hands down one of the best movies I've ever seen. I know I didn't talk too much about Parasite and the symbolism and the plot and everything. It's just I really, really want you guys to go in blind if you haven't seen it yet. And I think it's really, really important that you do that. So I'm gonna avoid talking about spoilers and things specifically for Parasite. So just go watch it. So next up, we're gonna be talking about Overlord, and this is the one movie in this video that is not a new release, but however newly discovered by me, and it came out actually in late 2018. I decided to watch it on Hulu on a whim, which I am so glad I did that. I don't know why, there was nothing about this movie that ever appealed to me, and I wish I had looked into it when it came out. I didn't even hear many people talk about this movie. Still to this day, I have not heard a lot of people talk about this movie, which is kind of mind-blowing to me because of the cast. There's at least 4 actors from Game of Thrones in it, and J.J. Abrams is a producer on it. They had a massively big budget and used primarily practical effects. So why people aren't talking about it, I don't really know. Maybe they did and I'm just late to the party here. So Overlord is actually a horror war movie, which is one of my favorite subgenres actually. I love a good war movie in general, but specifically horror war movies. Oh my gosh, if you have any recommendations for your favorite horror war, because I feel like that's not too common, please leave some recommendations in the comments. So Overlord follows a group of American paratroopers on the eve of D-Day who drop behind enemy lines in a Nazi-occupied village, and they soon realize that there are actually disturbing experiments happening there. I don't want to give too much away about the plot and what type of horror movie this actually is, but of course there is a lot of gore, and like I said, they used primarily practical effects in all of the scenes and didn't use too much CGI, and they did this so they could get like a more genuine reaction from the actors, and I think that just makes it so much more effective, and practical effects is always gonna be my favorite thing when movies do that. Like I said, J.J. Abrams is a producer on this, so naturally the action scenes are gonna be really good, and they were, and the acting is amazing and the storytelling's really good, but I think my favorite element is of course the horror elements within this, and it's not just gore that's horror, it's the actual like experiments, and it's highly disturbing. I read that some people suspected that this took place in the Cloverfield universe, but J.J. Abrams said that it is not in fact part of the Cloverfield universe, and I don't get that at all. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. It obviously did not take place in the Cloverfield universe. I don't know if you think that it did or have any theories as to how it could fit in the universe, please let me know. I was very surprised at how much I really liked Overlord. I went in blind without hearing about it or reading about it or anything like that. I remember when it came out, but something about the cover didn't appeal to me, and I didn't really hear anything about the plot. So if I did, I definitely would have been more interested because I love horror war movies. But this has definitely been one of my favorite horror movies that I've watched as of late. Okay, next up we're gonna talk about The Color Out of Space, and I laugh because it's another one of those strange Nicolas Cage movies, and they're endearing. I'm just not sure if they're for me. So Color Out of Space follows a family living on a farm after a meteorite lands in their front yard and begins infecting their minds and bodies. This is actually based on a short story by H.P. Lovecraft, and I feel like they definitely represented the Lovecraftian essence in this movie. They definitely nailed that. And the visuals in this movie are actually the standout, I think. And when the horror elements did kick in later in the movie, and boy did they kick in, there are a lot of like jarring scenes and scenes that are very hard to watch and look at for an extended period of time. It makes you feel very uncomfortable, but I feel like the horror elements were so limited to that one kind of instance, and if you've seen it, you know what scene I'm talking about. I wish that there was more horror. I felt like it came in really late in the movie and it didn't last that long, and granted, this is much more of like a sci-fi kind of movie than a straightforward horror movie. There are obviously horror elements in it, like very obvious, but I do wish that there was a lot more of that. And although I liked a lot of the visuals and the general plot and story of this, I just don't know how I feel about it. I don't think it was spectacular. A lot like Mandy, I get the hype around it, like I get why people love it, but for me, it's just, they're not my favorite types of movies, I guess. I was entertained, but it was still kind of meh for me. And I think it just is strange Nicolas Cage movies just aren't my cup of tea, and that's okay. They're still entertaining to me. Like, I still watch them knowing that they're gonna be strange Nicolas Cage movies, obviously, but they're not my favorites. It wasn't bad. It wasn't like a bad movie. I would rewatch it. I think maybe my biggest issue with The Color Out of Space was that I was expecting a completely different movie almost, because I heard the plot of a meteorite landing on Earth and it contained a color that had not been seen by humans, and it makes them act strange. So with that plot, I thought it would be a much bigger kind of movie with like more people involved, but it was pretty contained to like this family farm, which wasn't terrible. And it technically did that. Like, it did what it, you know, explained, but I definitely was expecting something a lot different from it, so maybe that's just on me that I had different expectations. I do like the explanation as to why they used the color magenta as the color out of space, as the alien color, because obviously they can't create a new color that we haven't seen before. And they said they used magenta because it does not exist on a single wavelength of light as part of the spectrum, and it is only created in our minds when the rods in our eyes detect red and blue in a very specific way. So it's a very unique color for our brains to process, which I think is a really cool idea and reason why they used magenta in the movie. So yes, the horror elements were good. I just wish there were more of them, and the story generally is cool, and I like that it has to do with space because space movies are my favorite genre. So if you have any horror space movie recommendations also, please, can you tell I'm asking for so many recommendations because I'm just like bored in the house. Okay, last movie we're gonna talk about is The Hunt, and this one, again, I did not review because it is technically not a horror movie, at least to me, but it is listed as the second genre on IMDb is horror, so we're gonna talk about it. Also, a lot of you asked me to, so. The Hunt follows a group of 12 strangers that wake up in a clearing, not knowing how they got there or where they are, and they soon realize that they're actually being hunted. So this is actually one of the first movies to be affected by COVID-19, and they of course pulled it from theaters because no one was going to the movies, and they released it online instead to be rented or viewed video on demand online, which I really appreciate that movie companies are doing this because I am very excited for many more movies coming out later this year, so I definitely want to still watch them and review them for you guys. And I honestly just think that's more accessible anyway, to have them be available online, and maybe it'll create a new way for people to go about finding movies. Now apparently this movie, The Hunt, had a lot of controversy around it, and it was actually pulled from its original release date last year because of mass shootings. And I'm not sure if that was the controversy part. I honestly didn't hear anything about the controversy last year. I'm not sure if that's why it was controversial, but I kind of suspect the controversy came from the fact that it is a political statement because they portray liberals hunting conservatives in the movie. And I don't think they painted the liberal, like it, when you first hear that, you'd think that they'd paint the liberals a certain way, and obviously they portrayed them in a negative light because they're hunting people. But I do feel like it is, at the end of the day, just satire, and to me was really effective and funny and not to be taken too seriously. I think it pushed the the limit for sure, but it was for like entertainment purposes, not really a huge political statement to be like very serious. I mean, I'm a liberal. It was funny to me. Don't take it too seriously. Personally, I like when both sides are commentated on, like in American Horror Story Cult. They didn't make either side look good. So I think that is a good thing, honestly. So this movie was very surprising. I like this movie so much more than I thought I was going to, because these kinds of comedy thrillers aren't really my thing. When they're heavily rely on comedy, it's not really my thing, and you guys know that. I'm not a huge fan of comedy. Some of the comedy in this was a little too much, like it wasn't funny to me all the time, but some of it did land with me and was actually really effective. And this movie has an extremely high body count, which is, you know, part of the horror elements, I guess. And I liked that so many of the deaths were so unexpected that you just had no idea who was gonna die next or how or what was real or within the hunt. Like you just didn't know. Like, you could go in expecting something, but it's not gonna be what you think it is. I just think that this was a really good, like, fun, entertaining kind of horror movie. So if you're in the mood for something a little lighter, something that's not too dark or anything, I think this is a good choice. And it was definitely way more entertaining than I thought it was gonna be for me, because I'm kind of picky when it comes to that kind of stuff, but it was fun. It was a good movie. So there you have my thoughts on those 4 movies. Please let me know your thoughts on these 4 movies, and if you want to leave any requests for what you want me to talk about and review while we are in this lockdown. Hopefully I can find things online, and they are releasing things still online, but it is kind of an interesting time. So if you have any movies or decades you want me to review and go over, please let me know down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you soon.